Welcome back to the Fuel Throttle Podcast, the show for riders who live and breathe performance. We're talking tech, Dyno results, and behind-the-scenes stories from the team here at Fuel Moto. Let's kick things off. Hello, Jamie here today, and I got Lucas again with me. Today we're going to talk on our podcast about the kind of overall subject of V-twin industry truths and misrepresentations. Some of the things we see day in, day out here at Fuel Moto, and things we hear from customers, how the industry's changed, and kind of the direction we see things going and how it has been. Let's get into it. Things have changed a lot in the landscape over the last 25 years that we've been in business here. Obviously, before that, it was very different because that was at the infancy of the internet. We got started here in the early 2000s. I guess the most popular forms of communication, there was no Facebook or YouTube or anything yet. It was a lot of internet forums and things like that from the early to mid-90s. It first started out as message boards. Believe it or not, a form of communication that was really popular between e-com companies and customers and things in the infancy was eBay. So there was a lot of eBay messaging back and forth, and we grew a pretty big base based on that. Lucas, you were just a little guy in that, but you probably remember Dad sitting there on a computer every night dealing with eBay and internet people. But over the years, we've seen that shift from that to a lot of internet forums. Then it turned to social media, and then now it kind of evolved into Facebook groups.
Yeah, that's been largely what pretty much everything has changed into. It's definitely changed the dynamic of who's the authority and who gets final say, and also kind of in some cases extreme censorship and moderation, or even in some groups the extreme opposite of the end.
One thing that's really changed from back when it was internet forums, internet forums traditionally had moderators and admins, and then they would have paid sponsors, which were generally businesses and companies. We did that for a long time. We're involved in all that. We still are in some of it. The biggest thing I've seen changes is very early when people got to bickering and fighting and telling mistruths and things. They had moderators and admins that would straighten that stuff out, But over the years, as social media risen, the forums became not quite as popular. Some of these people actually were paid employees that were administrating these sites, and these guys were just volunteers. Pretty soon there was none of that, and then fighting, bickering, and arguing kind of happened. And then now what we see on Facebook group, a lot of that's kind of back where we were in the very beginning. I'm going to keep this positive, and we're not going to talk about any specific pages or people or individuals or nothing. We're just talking about industry as a whole and how you got to learn and evolve with it.
Yeah, it's definitely for more personal gain now, because like you said, the forums were a business basically as arbitrators or moderators, and now it's turned into the people that own it generally are the people that have a vested interest, which, I mean, there's all sorts of people for every industry and reason they might have a group. I mean, there's plenty of different groups for all sorts of areas of even the Harley industry, but...
Well, that brings up a really good point, and who actually owns these Facebook groups, a lot of them. Some of these groups that people are participating in, they're owned by different companies. So what you see a lot of times behind the scenes is people are not able to share on free will. And that's really one of the things that I take up personally with it. It really bothers me that if you share one company's or one shop's dyno chart or product, they'll just delete it right off there. And that's not free will. It can't be like that.
It's one thing to have your own page as a business or a person or celebrity, whatever, and have that be monitored and specific to you. But when you have a group that's under the guise of being a free space and a neutral zone, that really is just, like I said, has vested interest.
Because I've been doing social media, internet forum stuff for almost 25 years, I can really see that we have to evolve with how this all stuff goes, but I see a lot of unfairity in that. Some of these pages and people, I mean, I personally have not seen things come up before with a question on our product or a service or something that we're involved in. I'll try to sign up and jump on there, and they won't even let me join the page.
Right. Yeah, that's the biggest thing. I mean, if you're a business or a person that's trying to promote their own stuff, I mean, that's one thing, but it becomes a little bit of a gray area when it results in just actual misinformation about someone else's product. When they're not able to participate or give a say, it really just becomes misrepresentation. But
I know some companies that have really been affected by that, and they haven't been able to voice their part of the story just because it's one-sided. And there's obviously the other side of that too. There's companies that have been very successful. And again, I would say we are very, very happy on how our social media stuff works and relationship with customers and stuff. But we have companies that come to us, so we work with. It's not uncommon for one of our vendors or manufacturing call up and say, "Hey, how does this work? Why is this place saying this?" Well, we don't want to be in the middle of that drama stuff, but we understand how the companies get frustrated because they don't understand. They're like, "Well, I'm trying to answer questions on this page, and these people just keep deleting what I say," and everything. Well, it's because they don't want you to say it. As far as the information on those sites, there's a lot of good information. There's no doubt. That's what brings people to social media, because there's so much media overload, whether it's information about products, dyno charts, pictures, experiences. And truth be told, you meet a lot of cool people on social media. And for us, it's really good for business for sure too. And it's all about participation. And one thing I've always said is, from the very beginning, we've played the long game on a lot of different strategies. And if you put 100% accurate data out there, products you can stand behind, you're 100% honest, you don't embellish things, that is always going to stand on its own, and that's always been one of our attributes. And not everybody plays by that though. And especially over, I would say, really since 2020, a lot of companies, I'd say almost play dirty, but some of them did. But that's just, I guess, part of the industry evolving, how people communicate now.
Yeah. That was a time where a lot of pages got a lot bigger and people were inside and on social media.
One of the biggest things that I see that is an issue and really a letdown for consumers in the end is companies or individuals, are they using firsthand experience, or are they using information, text or copy that they've got from somebody else? Or are they just parroting or regurgitating something? That happens so much. So much. People talk about tuning dyno charts, exhaust systems, and they'll say, you got to use this pipe, or you got to use these injectors. That doesn't work. This doesn't work. I mean, 95% of the time, they're not saying that because they've experienced that firsthand.
Right. Yeah. And that's a unique upper hand that we have as a relative authority in the industry, is the fact that we have so many bikes that come through. We work with so many bikes weekly, remotely, and we've just tested so many products.
To give an idea, this week, how many people do you think that you helped assist remote tuning, including dealers?
Yeah. And
I mean,
tuning alone is probably encompasses, it can be over 100 people a day, unique customers. And not everyone is going to be physically modifying or editing a tune, but a significant portion of them are. And a lot of the other ones are still just helping them with technical support and that sort of thing. So overall, unique tunes sent a week, it's well in the hundreds, if not over 500, especially right now with bike
busy
week
season coming up.
Yep. This is really,
and a lot of those too are dealers and shops.
Yep.
And a lot of them people are shops that want assistance or support or help with tunes. This is all stuff that has to be learned. It isn't hereditary. We all have to. We had to learn it. We had to figure it out. We had to do it.
It's difficult. You can tell some of the people you work with, and sometimes in the demeanor and the manner with which they get in contact with you, or if you just have a mutual customer that's trying to get you guys together and they're not in contact or responding, you can tell some of them have preconceived notions.
Oh, and that goes both directions for sure.
Yep.
Because we'll have one guy will call us, or email rather, and they'll say, yeah, I want to do this, I want to do that, I'm excited to do this, and it'll be something, say, for example, that we've done day in, day out. Let's just use, for example, a Woods 22XE cam with a 114 with our 2-into-1 or our 2-into-1 head pipe and the tunes. We are going to be able to hit that so strong, and that thing will work. It's really flexible as far as exhaust and things and that guy will be excited. We know we can get that combination to either him or his shop or whoever, and that thing is just going to be a rock star. But then on the other side, we'll have a guy will call up and say, hey, I want this cam, that cam, because this or that, and I heard this. And he's already been instructed. We can hear it. The same goes to a dealer or shop calling us. You can tell a minute into the conversation or even by the email whether or not they really want to work with the stuff or not.
Yep.
And bias is a big part of this.
Right.
If you're bringing your bike or buying parts and a shop's going to install it that they don't want to, they're not going to make it work right.
Yep.
They have to make it want to work.
Yeah. At the end of the day, parts are parts, and it either works or it doesn't. So there's no magic brand or cam grind or anything. There are a lot of things that work better, but cam's actually a really good example because that's such a subjective topic. I mean, a cam isn't what makes a build. Yeah.
Same with exhaust and all these other parts. We have seen so many times where if a customer has a combination, say he takes to get a dyno tuned, or he happens to take it to an indie shop or a dealer to have it installed, Some of these guys, they're pretty vocal. They're pretty passionate, we'll say. And if they start not wanting to do the products, there's a preconceived bias on that then. And I mean, we've seen every level of that, from somebody just might have been upset because they bought from somebody else, which we understand the whole situation too. But other times they may be upset because they might have a partnership with one of these other companies, or some of these guys are moderators on Facebook because we're on the Facebook pages they're on.
Yep.
So many dynamics to that. And you just got to be aware of what you're working with and what you're doing. One of the biggest boundaries that I see with the Facebook groups, comments, and messaging is that it seems like there's a good portion of people that just have to be the smartest guy in the room. They will not take that this person figured it out first, this person knows how to do it, but I don't, or it's something they've learned that I haven't learned yet. They do not want that. They do not like that. You don't have to be the smartest guy in the room. You don't. The biggest thing is have an open mind and a willingness to learn. That's how we do it every day. That's a big part of what we do here, is trying to figure this stuff out and get data to customers so they don't have to do quite as much as what we would have to do. Some examples we can go into is tuners and tuning. That's a big one.
Yeah. And for as long as I've been here, and as long as PowerVision has been out before I was here, we've been on a over decade run now of like our favorite buzzword is auto tune, and it's a lot of tuners, big kind of hot button issue. And that's a perfect example of something that's just completely misrepresented and misconstrued in media. I think to some degree it's by people that think it is conflicting with their business, when in reality it's just an example of a tool that can be used by anyone, whether it be a dealer, customer, tuner, and anyone. So that's a good example of something that's a conflict of interest.
That is absolutely an example. For those that don't know, auto tune uses the same logic, the same data as what you would on the dyno. In fact, a good portion of the dyno tuners traditionally and still do use auto tune.
Right.
They don't want to tell you this when you show up.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of these guys, I mean, there's people for 10, 12, 15 years, as long as it was out, used auto tune on the dyno. Yeah. They used the same PowerVision box as the consumer did, put the thing on auto tune mode and ran through the tune. Well, now you can do that all in software. It's the same logic. It's the same data. Mm-hmm. The dyno doesn't do the tuning for you.
Right.
It's the data you're using. So whether you use auto tune or using the Tune Lab or Tuning Link within the dyno software, it's the same data, the same stuff. And essentially how that works is as you run the bike on a dyno and build your histogram or run through your log, it looks at the measured air-fuel ratio, and it also looks at, because it has the tune in front of it and in the software, it looks at what the tune's delivering, and it's very easy. Once you finish the log up, it basically takes the delta, takes the difference between the measured air-fuel ratio and the commanded, and splits out a correction to the VE table. So, I mean, that's simple auto-tune logic. There's several different softwares and tuning platforms that use various versions of the same thing.
Yep. This is traditional airflow model tuning. Every industry in any capacity that's tuning VE models or even MAF or any other 2D-based fueling logic as well is going to be the same thing. So,
right. And obviously there's a lot more tables and things in the overall realm of tuning, but on the fuel side, which is your first basic step to getting the vehicle tuned, we've had people that, again, shops we know have went on and rants about using auto tune and telling consumers not to use it, this, that. Some of these shops we know firsthand use auto tune. They call us and they ask questions, and we do it and we help them. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with that. They don't need to be ashamed of using auto tune, because it's a great way to tune the bike on the dyno. And especially like even now, say on the Gen 2 Harleys where they're more complex, using traditional tuning methods in a lot of respects is easier for dyno tuners to pick it up, because, and it's a good way to segue into what they traditionally did into the new way of doing. And on that same note, a lot of tuners, we're calling tuning shops and such, essentially Gen 2 stuff came out, and I hate to even say it this way, but their inability or inexperience with product functionality. That's a big thing you see probably every day.
Yeah.
Like how many shops do you get contact with a week that with a Gen 2 bike that, PowerVision won't work on this, or ThunderMax won't, you can't do this.
It's a commonality, and it's complicated to make a stock ECU, especially one like on the Gen 2 bikes that's a lot more complex than anything we've ever seen from Harley before. Work with all sorts of parts that we're swapping out and changes. I mean, it requires fine adjustment just because the first swing you take at something and running it on the stock tune, it doesn't run right, or it throws a code or something, that does not signal a inability of the tuning device you're using. I mean,
the days of just flashing a tune in and running it through on the dyno quick and making fuel adjustments and putting out the door, that's a little different with Gen 2.
Right. The platform alone, the hardware too, is so new. I mean, there's only so many people in relative to Gen 1 and earlier stuff that are doing big bore kits and swapping cams, and now we have VVT in the mix and all sorts of things.
Well, one thing that I would say has given us a good advantage on that, obviously it's a huge advantage and a great relationship with DynoJet that we can be early adopters and help develop a lot of the base maps and the backside of the tunes and what works and what doesn't, and get that figured out before it ever comes to a consumer or a tuning shop. I can tell you for sure on this Harley stuff, what has helped a ton is a previous experience in car tuning in other ECUs. The Bosch and other stuff we tune with in other vehicles has really made a big difference. Even comparing to Indian, that really was helpful because we were doing a motorcycle torque-based tuning since 2016. Those vehicles, the Bosch ME17s and now the MG1s on those bikes, that they had all torque-based fuel throttle control and stuff. So that really was a big part of learning some of the Harley stuff, even though it's different. I mean, it was a lot of the same theories and things like that. And then same with cars, and not to mention any turbo or nitrous stuff that we've done over the years. The more you tune, the more experience you get, the more you understand, how you have to adapt and learn some of these other systems. That was just something we want to touch base on AutoTune. Don't be afraid to use it. It works really, really well. Yeah, and you always can go back to what you had before. We dyno tune every single day here, so we know what the base maps look like when we start and when they finish. And we're not going to discourage anybody from dyno tuning a bike, but you certainly can. What we don't want to discourage people from taking a crack at it and learning. That's how you get familiar with it. And it really opened your eyes if you could see how simple and well these bikes tune in with not too much effort.
Yep. A lot of the hard stuff is already taken care of, especially for us when we're supplying people tunes. So the main thing is really just some relatively, in many applications, rudimentary airflow and fuel tuning and spark tuning. So
nothing hurts more than seeing a tuning shop or an individual discouraging somebody to do their own work or tune. They're never going to know unless they do it.
Yep.
And again, it comes back to what we talked about before, bias. Obviously there's a reason why some of these tuning shops and companies sit there and go, you can't do this, none of this works, none of it works as well, because they want to dyno tune your bike.
Right. And now it's escalated to the point of shops claiming 20, 30%, 30, 40% gains before and after tuning it with no part changes, and not to mention it being 20% over what the industry standard is for a given engine combination.
That really brings up the other topic we probably talk about is inflated dyno charts and numbers that have really evolved over they elevated themselves over the last couple of years.
It's actually pretty cool because a lot of customers have really followed along, especially in the M8 stuff, because Harleys have become so much more because of the performance bagger stuff, and people are following along on the performance side, and the performance sector is growing.
It is fantastic.
And
not to mention they're easy to work on.
Yeah, and the dollar to horsepower, especially on M8s, is super good. I mean, for the price of what it takes to get the parts and even labor to do a cam and stuff in these bikes, huge gains. But we've also seen now we're getting close to 10 years of the M8, and there are only so many new cam grinds coming out. There's only so much to gain still with a bolt-in cam.
A good share of them we worked with companies developing their grinds.
Yep.
And testing them. So a lot of times before them cams come to market, companies send the cam to us. We test them. We develop a fuel map, a Power Vision or Thunder Max base maps, and get that sorted. So when the cam comes out, those companies have a foundation to build off of.
Yeah, and now we've seen in relation to dyno charts what these bikes do. It's not just Fuel Moto. There's obviously a huge repository of dyno charts you can find from many big shops across the country that tune these regularly. And in 10 years, there's only so much more you're going to gain out of the same engine with the same cams. And all of a sudden now you see a couple shops being just particularly the same shops make significantly more power.
Big numbers. Yep. And I use a term all the time, common denominator.
Yep.
And you don't need to use our numbers, but you can use them as a baseline to go off of and go look across the internet. Call your dealer, talk to shops, call the manufacturers. That's probably one of the best things.
Yeah.
Call the manufacturers of the camshafts and exhaust. Hey, what kind of numbers do you think I'd make with this, or where can I expect to be? And if you find numbers that are all of a sudden 10 or 15% higher, I'm not going to say not to use those numbers. Just understand they're higher than normal. There's reasons numbers are higher.
Yeah.
There's reasons. If you have extremes on conditions, could be higher or lower. We have a whole article on the Fuel Moto University that goes through that really well. And we'll do another podcast and talk about that specifically too. But if you find numbers that are way higher or way lower than what you normally find, you got to find the reason why.
Yep. It's funny because now the extreme has shifted. And I think a lot of people are relatively apprehensive about it. But also, there's nothing wrong. At the end of the day, you can run it. You can make whatever numbers you want on a dyno. It's not going to make the bike make more power than it actually does. So it doesn't matter if you run it on 2 different dynos back to back and it makes 15 more horsepower in one.
Right.
The bike is not any faster on that dyno than it is in the other.
And it's funny about the numbers. I remember back in 2010 when we worked with Bobby Wood, we developed the TW555. And that was the first year where Harley had the limited, the 103 limited. So we had a 103 limited here, and we put the 555 cam in, our jackpot head pipe, and a set of our jackpot mufflers. And I'll never forget, we made like 98 horsepower with that thing. And we posted it on social media and on some of the forums. And there was a handful of shops that flipped out. They could not believe it. There's no way you're almost 100 horsepower on 103 with a bolt-in cam and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And here we are 16 years later, and it's like a normal thing. I mean, because we were the first to get that camshaft to market and showed what it did. It still is a great cam. We've had some cams, 103s, do over 100 horsepower with some grinds, not just wood stuff, but others that are out there. The dyno numbers thing is really something that you have to, again, look at common denominators. If your bike ended up low or your bike, for example, ended up high, it is what it is. It's just a number on a piece of paper. One other thing I really don't like that's coming out of this is we have customers that they're shameful to share their dyno charts and information because, if I put that on this Facebook group, I would get shredded because it made this much less. Then it goes into you should have done this camshaft or that exhaust don't work. And some of these are really good combinations and really nice stuff and numbers that a few years ago would have been fantastic.
Right.
Well, if you're using the same parts and the same things, that's not going to change. You got to look at what's changed. Some of the using parts that we helped maybe develop, some of the stuff that we've done behind the scenes long before it came to market. And we don't know everything. We got a pretty good handle on how these engines tune and how they work and the kind of power they make. And not to mention some transparency to DynoJet and their actual numbers from the manufacturer that makes the dyno.
Yep.
So we know how this all works. And on that same note, I have an idea how some of these shops that are maybe doing this, how they're manipulating their numbers, I would say a little bit. But I mean, again, it's neither here nor there. More power to them if they want to do that. But if the number is higher than what it really is, they're just lying to themselves. And but that's the way they want to do that. That's fine. You just got to take those numbers, though, and go off the common denominator. For example, when we post a dyno chart for a given combination, we don't post the high flyer. I'll take an average. All of our charts that are on our site and the charts we give back to customers are an average of the final results.
Yep.
So in the end, when we do it, we know exactly what engine temp. We have monitors all over our room inside that monitor the temperatures and relative humidity and all that stuff. We make sure that is right, make our final runs, do 3-4 runs, give the average one. Sometimes there'll be a little clutch slip or a tire jump that puts a little blip in the graph, or there's a little hook at the end where you bump the rev limiter. You take that off. You cut that off of there because that's again, you're only lying to yourself. I see those charts all the time where it's got a blip at the end of the graph.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Or a bounce in the middle that adds 5-7 horsepower torque.
You have to know how to read a dyno chart too. That definitely makes a big difference. Just an easy example that you see 100 dyno charts of a week about. Take a good 114 with a decent bolt-in torque cam, whatever. It makes 120 horsepower. It's not going to matter whether, regardless of who tunes it or what shop it goes to, if they tuned it right. It's not going to matter if they hand you a sheet if it made 120 on average and for some reason one run made 130 or one run made 110. Maybe they were going for the high flyer number on one and maybe the bike was pretty heat soaked on another. And the bike's going to run the same for you regardless after it's rolled off the dyno. So the numbers on the paper aren't what to live by. It's a great guide, especially like for us, we've built such a great repository of dyno charts because it gives people an idea of what to expect. And it's definitely a useful tool, especially when it comes to power delivery and building out your combination and giving you kind of a guide on what you like. But by all means, we're not saying to specifically zero in on a single dyno chart you find online, whether it's from us or anyone else, and say, hey, I'm going to copy this build. But then sometimes you get into the whole thing of mixing it with other ones and thinking that you're going to make whatever high flyer be even better with a different part or a different pipe or cam, whatever. But yeah,
bigger injectors.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
Because a couple of those social media guys are really fixated on you have to put larger injectors. And we'll do a full podcast on injectors and all that. But one very important thing about injectors is there's only one thing that can tell you what size injectors you want, and that's your engine.
Yep.
You can't look at a dyno chart unless there's something very wrong with it. You can't look at the dyno chart and say, oh, that needs bigger injectors.
Right.
You know,
The only thing that could tell you that is if the dyno chart has much more data that 99% of people would never put on there anyways. So
right.
you need log data. You need to know how the bike is running.
Yep, the duty cycle of that injector, that's going to tell you whether it's maxed or you have enough sealing on the duty cycle. That's the only thing. And obviously a bigger problem is if you put too large injectors in. That's a bigger problem in most cases than too small, because too small injectors are going to affect the upper right side of the upper high RPM of the curve. You're going to run an injector where you're not going to be running that area very often in most cases on the street and such. But if you put larger than necessary injectors, you're going to have a pulse width at low RPM. You know, once it drops under a certain pulse width, it's going to go nonlinear and the injector is going to fall off, and you're going to have all kinds of issues there controlling that.
Right.
So
minimum pulse width is really just the same but opposite of what happens when you max duty cycle on an injector. Yeah.
Probably worse because you're not starting the bike or leaving stop signs.
Right. Right. Exactly. Right. Yeah, you're right. That's in extremely fine areas of the tune that require precision. At really light throttle where you want more resolution, you lose that extremely because under a certain pulse width and an injector, it's like I said, it's just like when you max a duty cycle. When you're too low, now that injector is extremely hard to modulate.
So much of this really is having the firsthand data and knowing it versus somebody telling you,
right,
or regurgitating or reusing what somebody else. Well, even worse than that now is AI. That's probably the worst. You could say, what exhaust pipe or what size baffle should I use? They ask it into a search engine now.
Right.
Like AI is just scraping data from wherever it knows. It doesn't really
know.
And
it doesn't help, too, when all these same influencers or celebrity shops, they have extremely good relevancy. And don't get me wrong, they have a lot of really good videos, even ones that directly compete with us. And that information is definitely influencing AI and search engines. That's spreading a lot. Someone talking on social media that reaches a couple 100,000 people, that's a lot easier to share and to immediately send to your friends or send to a group or post on your page or comment. And some of them are not necessarily people that have been in the industry and they were working on Harleys and learned how to tune and what parts and everything to use after the fact. The industry dictated what they should use and what they wanted to sell. So they have a vested interest in promoting that.
And going back to not having to be the smartest guy in the room, I'm going to violate that myself for a minute, but nothing is more comical to me than watching a video or seeing an internet post or even somebody sending an email telling me or you how things are or our staff here when I can see it's something I wrote or you wrote or something we talked about in a video a while back or even other companies we work with. I'm like, hey, I know who wrote that or said that phrase.
Even when we're not necessarily people that said it or that know it,
there's
like,
so
we don't claim
much
to.
of our data off our university site is copied and pasted, not on just forums and Facebook groups, but on other companies' websites. So much of that.
Right. Web data and product information.
Yeah, they scrape our sites. And
that's, don't get me wrong. I mean, even about the AI thing, that's to our benefit sometimes too. There definitely is a significant amount of, like Jamie said, our information from our university page and a lot of our product information that it's probably biased towards us in terms of some of the pages that have a lot of traffic and seem to be well accepted. That information is scraped from our site too. So it's hard to separate it now. That's why AI is a very subjective topic. At the end of the day, I tell people regularly, don't ask AI how to tune your bike. You're either going to work with someone that does it every day and trust their work or try and do it yourself with AI, although I haven't really seen the best results with that across any
especially
industry.
On the tuning sides.
Yeah.
In closing, we wanted to do this podcast for the main reason of customers being able to purchase and make informed decisions on free will.
Yep.
That's what it comes down to. I mean, that is really the foundation when I started this company. That's how I did it. I wanted to do it how I wanted to do it. At the time, 20 some years ago, that was really different because we wanted to help people with fuel maps and be very readily available by email and by phone and help people with their purchases and put packages together. And actually, that's one of the very first things I did when I was at the Honda shop. I was putting packages together for VTX 1800s, all the Honda CBRs, RC51s. And then it went into, let's do packages for R1s, GSXRs. I was always a big GSXR guy, of course, but that's really where this all started. And again, we can't thank everybody enough for all the great customers and years that we've had here. We really appreciate all the business and friendships we had over the years. And we would love to just give the advice, don't be discouraged to do your own work, to do your own tuning, to share your experiences, is that's what we're doing here. And that really created something that I really think was special over all the years.
An honest and neutral marketplace that we try and offer by all means is very evident in the fact that we have relationships with everyone. It might look a certain way on social media to some people for sure, but if you come here and look at our inventory and what we stock and what we sell, we work with every brand, every shop. If you call here, if you buy, if you want us to sell, we are very, very neutral and open and just for everyone. There's enough work out there for everyone and enough people that need parts from every brand, and that's why we try to carry it all.
Okay, we're going to wrap up for today, and I thank everybody for joining, and hit us up on the next episode. Thank you. If you like what you heard, be sure to leave a quick rating or share it with your riding buddies. Have a topic you want us to dig into next time? Send it our way at marketing@fuelmotousa.com, and thank you for tuning in.